Hello and welcome to this beautiful sunny fall day here in Southwest Colorado. My name is Stacy Couch and my website is wildgratitude.com. I've been going on two different ventures with you, two different paths. One regarding the healing technique in shamanism called soul retrieval, and then the other looking at archetypes in Southern California. She asked me about patterns because she had heard me speak about patterns in both the series on archetypes and the series on soul retrieval. And so she was trying to reconcile what all of that meant. And she's right. There's repeated patterns that show up in our lives in regards to both. And then this question does a really great job of bringing the two themes or the two subjects together. And I'm really excited to share that with you. But first, I would really appreciate to be able to take you on a quick review of what I'm talking about with patterns in regards to soul retrieval and soul loss, and then patterns in regards to archetypes and those gifts that we're here to express in this lifetime. First of all, when we're looking at soul retrieval and mostly soul loss, we're looking at that we've lost a piece of our personal power because of some sort of traumatic event. And then we no longer have that power, we no longer have that gift or that ability with us. And so then we find ourselves repeating the wounding over and over again. If you talk to any shamanic practitioner, they will tell you that one of the key symptoms of soul loss, and one of the main ways that you can know that you are experiencing and grappling with soul loss, is when we find that we're in the same wound over and over again. Now, let me give you a couple examples before I move on, just to refresh and jog your memory. A really great example is someone who ends up in the same type of romantic relationship with the same type of person over and over and over again, despite their very best efforts, his or her very best efforts, to choose differently, to choose a different type of partner and have a different type of relationship. That's a really great example, and one that we know really well. Another example may be a boss. The boss may be too dictatorial for your taste, or may not recognize your gifts. And you may have, no matter where you're working or what field you're working in, how many hours a week you're working, what state it's in, you seem to always end up working for this boss, the same kind of boss, no matter who, over and over again. It's often when we're in a situation that is wounding, that is upsetting, that is frustrating, and it happens no matter our best efforts to prevent it from happening. And that's what soul loss looks like. It's because we don't have that soul part, that gift, that power on board to actually prevent us from getting into those situations in the first place. And that's why I have a lot of people come to me looking for soul retrieval, because they're really frustrated and stuck, or looking for a change, and they've been trying a number of other ways and maybe made some progress here and there, but they're really hoping to make a quantum leap with the soul retrieval, which they are able to. So that's soul retrieval. Now, when we're looking at archetypes, we've also got patterns. But the patterns are, just like with archetypes, where all archetypes have either a light or a shadow side. The same is true with the patterns that we experience through archetypes. So they're not just negative patterns. Sorry, if you hear some... Diesel's joined us again for my dog for the video, so he's over in the side here chomping on a stick, which is kind of making some noise. So with patterns, with archetypes, we're not just looking for the bad, negative patterns that repeat themselves, that frustrate us or stymie us. We're also looking for the positive patterns. So the experiences where we barely have to put in any effort at all, and we're able to just flow in our artwork. Or we barely have to do anything at all, or we don't think about it consciously, and before we know it, we're in 20 different hobbies at once. That would be the dilettante archetype. So it's those things where no matter what you're trying to do elsewhere, or even if there doesn't even seem to be any support around for this particular experience in your life, that it just keeps happening in you. You either keep being drawn towards it, or it keeps being drawn towards you. And so you have these repeated experiences of within the sphere of that archetype. So hopefully that makes sense. That with the archetype, the patterns that we experience or see in our lives, the things that happen over and over again for us, they can be both either positive or negative. Whereas when we're looking at soul loss, we're looking at negative patterns that have come in related to woundings and trauma. Oftentimes when in soul loss, if we're looking at a pattern in soul loss, either you're listening to yourself, or it really helps if you're able to listen to a friend, is you start talking to them about the current day situation. So say you're talking to a friend, and you start talking to her about the current day situation with her boss. And then, before you know it, she's talking about the boss she had 20 years ago, the very first boss of this kind that she had 20 years ago. That very much points to soul loss and the experience of not having power to be able to break out of that pattern. And we like to go to the past, right? That's where our wounds are anchored, in the past. So all of that said, it seems curious, right, that we have patterns both places. How does this look? Well, to answer that question, I am going to tell you that they are very closely related. These patterns that we experience as a result of soul loss and the patterns we experience as a result of archetypes. They are almost interchangeable, or one and the same. And I hate to talk in too many definitives here, because it's hard, because we can get really literal and really logical and structured with this, and systematic with this really fast, which can squeeze some of the life out of it. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit more broad for you and not get too cause and effect related with you. At the same time, I think it's worth understanding this. So with soul loss, with a lost soul part, that soul part and that lesson or that experience or that trauma that we keep reliving is actually within the sphere of a given archetype that you've come into this life with. And it's just in the shadow aspect of the archetype. See if you can follow me through this. I'm going through the steps pretty fast. And once we have a soul retrieval of that particular soul part, and we're able to express the gifts of that, we're also expressing the light aspect of that archetype. It's really, really simple when we think about it that way, and that's why I use the whole thing with kind of a little bit of kid gloves, because I want to make sure that we don't get too intensive with this, because we could, every soul retrieval, every soul part that comes back, we could really work hard logically with our mind, trying to rationally fit it into a specific archetype. And there is benefit to that, because then the archetype helps flesh out the whole thing, and then we can also see the gift of the soul part, because that's hard when we've been in the loss of the soul part and the trauma of the soul part. It's really hard when the gift of the soul part comes back to move into that logically, because we've been telling this old story over here, and so now we have this new story to tell. So if we also have the archetype tied in, and we know the light aspect of that archetype, it can really help us also then attribute the gifts to the soul part. So in that way, in a logical perspective, it's very, very helpful. But like I said, we have to be a little bit careful with this application, because it can definitely start to squeeze the juice out of the intuitive, the energetic work that's happening, both in the sphere of archetypes and in the sphere of soul parts. There's something going on behind the scenes. And I don't always know that every soul part that comes back is attributed to just one archetype also. It could be a combination. It could be opposing archetypes. it's really tough to know. And sometimes in the soul retrieval journey that I do for people, it is absolutely clear that it's this particular soul part, because at the end, when I ask her what the gift is that she's bringing back, she's dressed in a magician's costume. I mean, so it's pretty easy to relate that to an archetype. Or she may be nurturing an animal like a mother would, so it's very clearly the mother archetype, or something related to a caretaker, a rescuer, something along those lines. So there are times when a very direct correlation between a soul part and an archetype comes through in the journey, and I think that's the time when we really should hone in on that as a useful piece of information, because it's coming from source, it's coming from spirit guides. It's when we have a soul part come back and there's just a lot that seems connected to it and a lot of moving parts, and we can feel something moving in us that is at a deeper, different level than just the rational mind. That's when we have to be a little bit careful, because we just don't really know. It could definitely be more than one soul part, and also, or soul archetype per soul part, and also the inverse of that. We could also have multiple soul parts that relate to a single archetype. If you have more questions about this, please,